Picture this. June 25, 2002. Gwangju, South Korea. 50,000 people inside the stadium, hundreds of millions more watching across the globe. And on the pitch, a nation rewriting history in real time. Spain have a goal disallowed. Then another. They've hit the post. They've had a man sent off. And when the final whistle blows on extra time, it's still 0-0. Penalty shootout. The weight of the entire tournament pressing down on every South Korean player as they walk to that spot 12 yards from goal. Then Myung-bo steps up. Converts. Then Lee Woon-jae dives left, stops Joaquin's kick cold. And then An Jung-hwan, the man who just days earlier had knocked out Italy in the round of 16. He rolls the ball into the bottom corner, and 60 million Koreans simultaneously lose their minds. South Korea had just knocked out Spain. They were in the World Cup semi-finals, the first Asian nation ever to reach that stage. The noise coming out of Seoul that night could have been heard from space. But here's the question that always hangs over that story. Was 2002 a miracle? Or was it proof of something deeper, something that had been building for decades inside Korean football, and something that is still building today? That's what this episode is about, because South Korea in 2026 isn't coasting on nostalgia. They're hungry, they're organized, and they've got a striker who might just be the most dangerous player in Asia. Let me take you to the land of the morning calm, and the occasionally ferocious football that comes with it. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel is working through all 48 nations heading to the 2026 FIFA World Cup, hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and building the definitive story behind every single squad. And when it comes to Asia, there is one footballing nation whose story looms larger than any other. South Korea. The Taeguk Warriors. 11 World Cup appearances. The only Asian nation to have ever reached a semi-final. A country that turned football fever into something approaching a national religion, and then kept building on it. This isn't a team riding legacy. Korea have qualified for every World Cup since 1986. That's 10 consecutive tournaments. They've produced legends. They've survived heartbreak. They've had eras that dazzled the world and eras that tested the patience of their famously passionate fan base. In 2026, they arrive at a fascinating crossroads. The golden generation of Park Ji-sung and Bum-kun is long gone. The Son Heung-min era is in its magnificent final chapter. And a new wave of talent, younger, sharper, more technically polished than anything Korea has produced in years, is beginning to emerge beneath him. The question isn't whether South Korea will be at the World Cup. They're always at the World Cup. The question is, how far can they go? Let's find out. Heading into the 2026 World Cup, South Korea sit comfortably in the upper tier of Asian football, ranked in and around the 20s in the FIFA World Rankings, typically the second or third highest-ranked team from the AFC Confederation at any given moment, trading places with Japan and occasionally Iran. Their road through Asian qualification was, in classic Korean fashion, efficient rather than spectacular. The third round of AFC qualification, the group stage that formally allocates the 8 automatic Asian berths, saw South Korea manage their campaign with the controlled confidence of a side that knows they belong at World Cups. They weren't flawless. There were patchy performances, a few draws against teams they might have been expected to beat more comfortably. But they got the job done. They qualified. They always qualify. Head coach Myung-bo, yes, the same Myung-bo from that 2002 penalty shootout, the man who has since come full circle, was reappointed to the role in 2024 after a turbulent period that saw Korea cycle through multiple coaches following the Qatar 2022 campaign. His first stint with the national team in 2013 to 2014 ended poorly. His second chapter has been defined by a determined effort to restore structure and belief to a squad that had, at times, seemed to be coasting on reputation. Tactically, Hong's Korea are a team built around defensive discipline and lightning-quick transitions. They press with intensity in the middle third, remain compact in their own half, and then release their forwards in rapid counterattacks the moment they win the ball. It's a style that suits their personnel, and it's a style that, when it clicks, is genuinely difficult to play against. The talisman, of course, is Son Heung-min. Son turned 34 in the summer of 2026 and is playing his 5th World Cup. At Tottenham Hotspur, he has continued to deliver at the highest level: goals, assists, leadership, though even the most devoted Korean fans know that this tournament represents the last realistic chapter of his World Cup story. He wears the captain's armband with the quiet authority of someone who knows exactly what it means to the people watching at home. Behind Son, the squad is more layered than at any point in recent memory. Kang-in, the Paris Saint-Germain midfielder, has matured into arguably the most technically gifted Korean outfield player since Park Ji-sung. Creative, brave on the ball, capable of the kind of incisive pass that unlocks any defense in the world. Then there's Hwang Hee-chan at Wolverhampton Wanderers, a relentless forward who combines direct running with clinical finishing. And a raft of younger talent playing across Europe's top leagues. More on some of them later. Korea's group draw in 2026 will be crucial. They're a dangerous team in the expanded 48-nation format, where 3 teams advance from each group of 4. If they can navigate the group stage, which they absolutely should, a second-round knockout match is where it gets interesting. They have the tactical intelligence to beat anyone on a good day, and they have a history of doing precisely that on the biggest stage of all. Dark horse? Perhaps too strong. Genuine round of 16 threat? Potentially round of 8? Absolutely. The Korea Football Association was founded in 1928, making it one of the oldest footballing bodies in Asia. Football arrived on the Korean peninsula through Japanese colonial administration, something of a complicated origin story given the fraught history between the two nations. But Koreans quickly made the sport their own. The first notable international appearances came in the post-war era. After the devastating Korean War of 1950 to 1953, a nation physically and emotionally shattered began to rebuild, and football became part of that process. The 1954 World Cup in Switzerland was South Korea's first ever appearance at the tournament, and it was, by any measure, a brutal introduction. They lost 9-0 to Hungary and 7-0 to Turkey. 9 goals and 7 goals in the World Cup's opening group stage. It could have broken the connection entirely. It didn't. Instead, Korean football retreated, developed, and came back stronger. The next 30 years were spent building the infrastructure, clubs, academies, a professional league that would eventually produce players capable of competing on the global stage. The K-League, founded in 1983, was transformative. It gave Korean players somewhere to develop within a professional environment, attracted foreign players and coaches who raised the technical standards, and created a footballing culture around clubs and regional identity. It was imperfect, and it was slow, but it worked. The 1986 World Cup in Mexico marked Korea's return to the global stage after a 32-year absence, and this time it felt different. They didn't win, they didn't even advance from the group, but they competed. They drew with Bulgaria, they showed they belonged, and crucially, they kept qualifying. 1990, 1994, 1998. Every 4 years, South Korea arrived. The 1994 and 1998 campaigns hinted at a team growing in confidence, without quite finding the breakthrough result. In 1994, they drew with Bolivia and Spain, but couldn't convert potential into progress. In 1998, a devastating 5-0 loss to the Netherlands punctuated a group stage exit that left Korean fans demanding more. And then came 2002. It is impossible to talk about South Korean football without talking about 2002 at length. Co-hosting a World Cup with Japan, South Korea entered their own tournament under Dutch manager Guus Hiddink, a coach who would become, in the eyes of many Koreans, something approaching a national deity. Hiddink was given extraordinary access and time to overhaul a Korean squad that was technically competent but psychologically rigid. He changed the culture. He made them fitter than any Korean team had ever been. He gave them belief. The group stage was remarkable. Korea topped their group ahead of the United States, Portugal, and Poland, with results that suggested something extraordinary was building. Then the knockouts began. Round of 16, South Korea versus Italy. 90 minutes. Extra time. Christian Vieri heads Italy in front. Francesco Totti is sent off. So Ki-hyun equalizes. And then, in the 117th minute of extra time, An Young-hwan, a man who played his club football in Italy for Perugia, scores the golden goal. His Italian club president was so furious he terminated An's contract. An didn't care. His country was in the quarterfinals. Quarterfinal. Spain. 2 goals disallowed. 1 deflection off a Korean hand missed by the linesman. It remains one of the most debated matches in World Cup history, and depending on your nationality, you either remember it as the greatest injustice the tournament has ever seen or the greatest underdog story. Then penalties. Then the image of Lee Woon-jae saving Joaquin's kick. Then Myung-bo lifting his arm in triumph. Semifinal. Germany. And here, finally, South Korea's extraordinary run met its end. Michael Ballack's header decided a match that Korea competed in bravely, but couldn't quite turn. They lost 1-0. Then they beat Turkey in the third-place playoff 2-3, a match where both sets of fans applauded each other, exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. South Korea finished 4th in the world. 4th. The aftermath was almost impossible to process. The team were given ticker-tape parades. Hiddink was made an honorary Korean citizen. The streets of Seoul, with their famous Red Devil fan gatherings, hundreds of thousands of people in matching red shirts screaming into the summer sky, those images traveled across the world and became one of the defining spectacles of the 21st century's early football era. But 2002 cast a long shadow. The years that followed were difficult. The next 3 World Cups, Germany 2006, South Africa 2010, Brazil 2014, saw Korea qualify, compete, occasionally delight, but never recapture the magic. In 2010, they reached the round of 16 before losing to Uruguay. In 2014, they crashed out in the group stage after a heavy defeat to Algeria. The gap between the 2002 peak and the subsequent decade began to feel uncomfortably wide. Qatar 2022 offered something of a redemption arc. South Korea squeezed through the group on the final day, Hwang Hee-chan scoring a dramatic late winner against Portugal, to face Brazil in the last 16. They lost 4-1 to a team that was, frankly, on an entirely different level that day. But the manner of their qualification, the drama of it, the roar when that Hwang goal went in, reminded the world that Korean football still had a heartbeat. Now comes 2026. And the question is whether this team, older and wiser in the form of Son, younger and more technically gifted than any Korean side in years in the form of Lee Kang-in and the new generation, can find a way to echo even a fraction of what happened 2 decades ago. Bum-kun, the pioneer. Before anyone else, there was Bum-kun, the man Pele once named among the greatest players in the history of the game. Born in 1953, Cha became the first Korean to play and excel in European football, spending most of his career at Eintracht Frankfurt and Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga. He won the UEFA Cup twice. He scored goals that German fans still talk about. At the World Cup, Cha was the living proof that Korean players belonged in elite company. He played in 1986 in Mexico, and while Korea didn't advance, every time Cha touched the ball, the watching world understood something important. This nation would produce world-class talent. He was the seed. Everything that came after grew in the ground he prepared. Myung-bo, the captain, the penalty, the manager. No player embodies the arc of Korean football quite like Myung-bo. Widely considered the greatest defender South Korea has ever produced, Hong played in 4 consecutive World Cups, 1990, 1994, 1998, and 2002. He's one of only a handful of players in history to achieve that feat. A sweeper of extraordinary reading of the game, calm in possession, commanding in the air. But his World Cup moment came with his feet, not his defensive positioning. June 22, 2002. The penalty shootout against Spain. Scoreless through extra time. Pressure so heavy it has physical weight. Hong stepped up first. He didn't hesitate. He buried it. That penalty set the tone for everything that followed. And later, in the greatest image of that tournament, Hong celebrated with his arm raised to the sky in a pose that became iconic. He is now the national team manager, completing a circle that feels written by a poet. Park Ji-sung, the lungs of a lion. Park Ji-sung might be the most influential Korean player in the history of the game, not because of technique, but because of what he made possible. A tireless, intelligent midfielder whose engine never ran out, Park played for Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson from 2005 to 2012, winning multiple Premier League titles and a Champions League. He was the engine in a team of engines. Fergie called him one of the most important players he ever managed. At the World Cup, Park was the heart of Korean midfields across 2002, 2006, and 2010. In 2002, he started that famous win against Portugal. In 2006, his goal against Togo made him the first Asian player to score at 3 consecutive World Cups. In 2010, he was the captain, dragging Korea through their group before the Uruguay exit. When Park ran, fans ran with him. He opened doors. After Park, European clubs stopped dismissing Korean players. His path was Korean football's path. Son Heung-min, the joy incarnate. The numbers almost don't matter, but let's say them anyway. Over 150 goals for Tottenham Hotspur, multiple Premier League Golden Boot contender seasons, a Champions League final, and for South Korea, more than 40 international goals, captaincy, and the unique weight of being the most beloved footballer his country has ever produced. Son is not just a footballer in South Korea. He is a cultural phenomenon. His smile, that particular incandescent, pure joy smile he does when he scores, is one of the most recognizable images in world sport. He is the kind of player who makes people who don't watch football understand why others do. His World Cup story has moments of brilliance scattered across 3 tournaments, but none more dramatic than the 2022 Qatar group stage. With Korea needing a win against Portugal to advance, and with Son having played through the tournament with a fractured eye socket behind a protective mask, Hwang Hee-chan scored the winning goal, and the image of Son's raw, exhausted, tearful relief was one of the defining human moments of that entire World Cup. In 2026, Son plays his final World Cup. That is not sentiment. That is simply the mathematics of age and football. And that awareness adds something electric to every moment he has left on this stage. Lee Kang-in, the next chapter. Born in 2001 in Seoul, raised partly in Spain as a youth player at Valencia, Lee Kang-in is the blueprint for what Korean football is becoming. Technically supreme, a creative midfielder who can play as a 10 or a wide forward, who dribbles in tight spaces with the confidence of someone who spent his formative years in La Liga's academy system. Lee is the most naturally gifted Korean player of his generation. His Qatar World Cup cameos hinted at the talent. His work at Paris Saint-Germain since then has developed it. By the time 2026 arrives, Lee is in his prime years. He is the player who will carry Korean football when Son is done. And there is a very real possibility that at this World Cup, he announces himself to the entire world in a way that makes people forget to keep comparing him to his predecessors. What South Korea gave the world in 2002 cannot be overstated. Before that tournament, Asian football was largely an afterthought in global football conversations. Yes, Japan and Korea had co-hosting rights. Yes, the 2002 tournament was the first World Cup held in Asia. But the expectation, the unspoken but widely held expectation, was that the Asian teams would play their part in the group stage and then politely depart. And then, Myung-bo lifted his arm against Spain. The Red Devils, the Korean supporter phenomenon, those hundreds of thousands of red-clad fans packing every public square in Seoul for every match, the most extraordinary fan culture the World Cup had seen to that point, showed the global game what it looked like when football was genuinely woven into the fabric of a nation. Korea's run changed how Asia was perceived in football. It encouraged investment in youth development across the continent. It made European clubs take Korean players seriously. It inspired a generation of children across Japan, China, Australia, Iran, and Southeast Asia to believe that Asian teams could compete, truly compete, at the highest level. Tactically, the 2002 Korean team introduced the world to what extreme physical preparation looked like in international football. Hiddink's methods, the fitness work, the pressing, the defensive organization, were studied and copied. Every intense underdog performance since has been described at some point as Hiddink-esque. The cultural contribution runs deeper still. Korean football culture has a specific flavor, disciplined, collective, ferociously team-oriented, that reflects something about Korean society more broadly. The concept of nunchi, the ability to read a room, to understand what's needed, to serve the group, shows up in how Korean teams play. They don't have one Galactico. They have 11 players who work for each other. And then there's the kit. The red of Korea's home shirt, sharp, vivid, iconic, is one of the most recognizable national football colors in the world. When those shirts filled the streets of Seoul in 2002, the images became part of world cultural memory. They weren't just watching football, they were inside something. Korean football also contributed enormously to the growth of Asian club competitions and the K-League's prestige. Even if domestic football has sometimes struggled to hold on to its best talent once European clubs come calling. The national team pipeline, from K-League academies to European development to national side, is one of the most systematically organized in Asian football. So, Summer 2026, United States, Canada, Mexico. South Korea arrive with a squad that might be the best balance they have assembled in a generation. Son Heung-min, playing his final World Cup, motivated by everything that word implies. Kang-in, entering his prime, capable of single-handedly deciding matches. Kwang Hee-chan, one of the more underrated forwards in European football. And a defensive structure under Myung-bo, built on the kind of organized discipline that gives every attacking team a problem. The expanded 48-team format suits Korea. 3 teams advance from each group of 4. If they avoid an extraordinarily difficult draw, group stage qualification is the realistic expectation. And in the knockout rounds, with their tactical flexibility and the sheer will that Korean teams bring to tournament football, anything becomes possible. Could they match 2002? Probably not. 2002 was a once-in-a-generation convergence of home advantage, perfect preparation, and a bracket that broke their way at the exact right moments. But could they reach the quarterfinals? Could they make the world sit up and remember that Asian football has a heartbeat? Absolutely. The thing about South Korea is that they never let you write them off. Every time you think the window has closed, they find another one and climb through it. My prediction? Korea get out of their group comfortably. In the round of 16, they cause one major upset, the kind that sends the streets of Seoul red again. And if Son Heung-min smiles that smile, you'll know something special is happening. What do you think? Can the Taeguk Warriors go deep in 2026? Drop your prediction in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you reckon. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this series covers all 48 nations, every single one, in full. Don't miss it. See you in the next one.